Okay, so following my friend Laura and the presentation that she did, okay, so now we're back in this spot like, all right, great, now what? How does this kind of relate back to the work that you guys are doing every day in your classrooms? How does it relate to the work that you guys are doing around assessment? So that's what we're going to spend the end part of our day around, is now taking a look at these different kind of assessments in action. So your assessments, some more examples from Smarter Balance, and where do the two kind of come together. But the first piece that I kind of want to talk about was a question that was some of my math friends asked me when I was going around during the gallery review at the beginning of our time together, which was, all right, so how do I know when I'm supposed to ask a selected response question versus when I'm supposed to ask a constructed response type question? So sometimes with the math standards, you can't always tell from reading the standard alone. Sometimes you can, but then sometimes you can't. Right? You may look at a fluency standard in the math standards and think, okay, that's real easy. That's always going to be depth of knowledge 1, selected response I can get away with, perfect. Except for my science friends, my social studies friends, and even my math friends are all beholden to these types of process standards that look a lot like what the ELA folks do all the time in their classroom. So it's kind of like in all the other content areas, you have to teach content, but you also have to teach the literacy components that go along with your content area. So in math, you might think, oh, okay, it's a fluency standard. It's always going to be depth of knowledge 1. I'm golden. I know what to do. Unfortunately, then you have those, what they call the mathematical practice standards, that tell you what math classes should look and sound like, making conjectures, critiquing the reasoning of others. And they don't tell you which content pieces you're going to have to do that around. So then you're kind of left wondering, so should I be having kids talk about fractions or multiplication or geometry and the answer, unfortunately, is yes. So how do I figure out that piece? So we're going to spend a little bit of time with that. But so that I don't show too much partisanship to my math friends, I put up 2 social studies standards up there. And so if you take a look at the first one, and I know that some of you guys are at bad angles, so, and this was not in the original PowerPoint, so it's not a slide on there, so I'm just to keep you guys guessing. So the first one, use cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, to describe relative locations of significant places in the immediate environment. That's the first one. Second one, use thematic maps to identify and describe the physical and human characteristics of Michigan. So both of these fall under the same kind of heading in the 3rd grade standards. But do you see a difference in that top standard versus the bottom standard? Okay, what do you see as a difference between the top one and the bottom one?
Complexity, for one.
Okay, so which one's more complex?
The bottom one.
The bottom one. Do you think that you could, with that bottom one, write a really good selected response question and get to the heart of what that standard wants?
Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not even if you did deconstruct it into pieces. There's not a lot of recall type stuff contained within that standard.
It's more look at a map and tell me, analyze it and
Could you have multiple correct response or multiple right answers for the same question within your class or within a group of kids?
Right. Yeah. 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 It's too broad to narrow it down to that piece. And what I feel there, too, is that there might even be a little bit of opinion that's in that standard. But up above, north, south, east, and west, that's, unless you're like me and always want to just north to be up, there's not opinion there, right? North is north no matter where you are. So could you write a pretty decent constructed response question around the top of that one, or around that top standard? No, selected. Did I say the wrong one? Sorry, selected, sorry. Could you write a pretty good selected response, sorry, around that top one? Yeah, sorry, yeah. So the reason that I asked, well, not the reason why I asked it wrong, but the reason why I asked that question was both of those are contained within the same grouping of standards. So when you take a look at, efficiencies that you might want to create, you're going to still have to kind of ferret out, like, which standards can I try to do with that selected response, but then which am I going to be beholden to this idea of a constructed response. So that's what we're going to kind of spend a little bit of our time taking a look at. And I think you guys hit on, and you already know, the reasons why we would ask a constructed response. The last one listed on there usually has more than one answer and or requires more depth in a response. That was something that we talked about at the math table. When you're asking a question that really only has one correct answer, that's kind of a clue, like that's the perfect kind of question. And when you're trying to create efficiencies, like that would be a question that you'd want to do constructed response or selected response. But the other types of questions are going to be probably lend themselves more to the constructed response. So the one thing that I thought was interesting was I was getting ready to present this part is that generally speaking, we think of constructed response as something that's going to take an elaborate amount of time. And when we take a look at some of the information that we have from Smarter Balanced, they actually don't define it that way. And there's actually a little bit of a separation between constructed response and extended response on the math test versus the constructed response and extended response on the ELA component. The constructed response on the math part is actually going to be, could still be a pretty short answer. Could take very little time. It's just that the kids are going to have to come up with it themselves. So it could just be that it's a number or a phrase that they have to put in their constructed response. And really the differences between this is that the constructed is 1 to 5 and the extended is up to 10 minutes or longer actually. And where they kind of separate themselves is that the extended response for math is only going to be included in the performance task component of the assessment, whereas the constructed response will be part of that adaptive part that the kids take. And that'll be a little bit different for ELA than it is for math. So just to kind of put some of that stuff out there. We realized today as we were going through and having you do some of the gallery walk and taking a look at that stimulus or the template about how to create a selected response that we didn't give you some of the vocab. So we want to kind of give you some of the vocab around the components of a constructed response item. And then I'm going to have you guys get up and kind of share some of the constructed response questions that you have on your assessments that you brought tonight. So just to give a little bit of the vocab, so the stimulus is the part of the assessment question that the kids are going to look at and respond to. And the STEM is going to be whatever you're going to have them do. So it's going to be the question they have to answer or the work that they have to complete. When you take a look at all of the constructed response questions that are in the Smarter Balanced stuff, they always include the rubric that they're going to use to score that assessment item. So you can, some of them are 3 points, some of them are 2, and then when you look at some of the ELA, extended or constructed response, those actually have 4 points for this, 2 points for this. It's a little bit more elaborate than they are for the mathematics, and we're going to take a look at those a little bit later. So what I want you guys to actually do, so this is what the math one would look like. So the stimulus, same thing. So it's the thing that you're going to have them look at or read. Usually it's reading, but sometimes in the math world it's going to be a graph that they have to look at. And then the STEM here at the bottom is still the question that they have to answer. And then the rubrics for math are much more straightforward than they are for ELA. Usually it says, did they get it right? Good, then you get full credit, which is usually 1 or 2 points. If you did not get it right, then you usually get 0. If you got part of it right, you can usually get 1 point. So what I'm going to have you guys do is I'm going to put up these guidelines, but instead of talking through all of them, to get you guys up and moving so that you don't fall asleep after you had your nice giant baked potato the size of your head, I am going to have you make a friend with someone from a different department, so you have to kind of get up from your seats, and each of you bring your assessment that you brought today and have a conversation similar to how you guys talked through the selected response at the beginning of the day, and see if, kind of do a little checklist in your head, take a look at each other's assessments, pick one constructed response question on your assessment that you brought that you want to take a look at, and work through these guidelines. Do you know the standard it was supposed to teach? Is it clearly written for the kids to understand? Did it hit the depth of knowledge you hoped? Okay, so just kind of work through. All right, questions? Seems like you're already ready to go. Perfect, go. Find a friend.